Welcome back to She Asked Tools for Practical Hope. I'm your host, Anna McBride, and I am so glad you're here. This is the podcast where we explore healing, resilience, grief, reinvention, and the conversations that help us navigate life with more honesty and compassion. As I said, I'm your host, Anna McBride. I'm a therapist, coach, and someone who believes that the hardest seasons can become the best teachers and they can connect us to deeper conversations, healing, and meaning. Through my coaching work, retreats, and podcasts, I support women navigating grief, divorce, life changes, and emotional healing. If you're looking for support in your own season of change, you can learn more about all that I offer through annamcbride.com. Today's episode is an important conversation because we're talking about something our culture spends very little time really talking about, and that is grief. Not just death itself, but caregiving, grief, end of life planning, family dynamics, fear, and what it means to truly support someone through one of life's most difficult and precious times. Today, I'm joined by Amy Ascalon, a death doula and hospice volunteer whose work centers around helping individuals and families navigate the emotional, spiritual, and practical realities of dying. Amy, welcome to She Asked. I'm glad
Thank
you're
you.
here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. As always on our podcast, we like to begin with a story. So, Amy, people don't usually wake up one day and decide to become a death doula, as far as I know. I'd love to have you take us back to the beginning and what brought you into this work.
Many years ago, probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, my grandfather passed away. I was very close to him. He was sick for a long time. And when he passed, my grandmother was alone and she called hospice and the funeral home. And the funeral home came right away and was trying to take my grandfather. And my grandmother was not in a good headspace, obviously. And she just kind of freaked out and was like, "Where are you taking him?" Like it just happened so quickly. And they said, "We're gonna take him to the funeral home." And she's like, "Well, where is he gonna go?" And they said he's
Mm,
gonna go into the freezer or the refrigerator rather. And she said, "But he's gonna be cold." And they said, "Well, then we can embalm him," which was not a part of his death plan. In
mm,
the Jewish culture, we don't embalm, which is one reason why we bury so quickly.
okay.
And so my grandfather was embalmed. And when I
Mm,
found that out, I was so disappointed that it didn't go the way that he wanted it to go. Um, and it just wasn't part of the tradition that, years and years of our family have done. And so that kind of always stuck with me. Uh,
mm,
Years later, during COVID, I was in HR and I worked in benefits. We were dealing with a lot of death, a lot of people getting sick. Not only our employees, but our employees' parents and friends. And um, it was a time where I felt like people needed an ear, someone to listen, someone just to listen. Employees started calling me just to talk about their loved one being sick or passing, and I wasn't really even saying much, but just having someone that they could kind of talk to without judgment
right.
was something that seemed to be missing.
Mm,
And I actually heard a podcast uh, not long after that was following a death doula. That was the first time I heard about it in
mm,
2020. And the story was so beautiful of this family that brought this woman in, and she stayed with them until the end, and she became almost um, she just kind of lightly guided the family and helped them where they needed, not overstepping. And it was so beautiful. And that kind of stuck with me as well. And then when I got laid off from my job a few years later, um, this was the only calling that was coming to me.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing story taken from your real life and even then transported to true purpose, which I think is where all that comes from. And so I really wonder how your own experiences with grief shaped this path.
I think it was more so with death and dying and preparing than for grief.
Oh, okay.
Um, I think, but I also think that for those family members, grief starts before the person dies. Uh, the
Mm,
person is changing
right.
um, well before if they're ill, well before they actually pass. And
Mm,
so I think a lot of times the caregiver or the loved one feels that grief and doesn't know how to respond to it
right.
before the actual death. And almost sometimes I feel like the death,
Mm,
which is the most dreaded thing that could possibly happen, is kind of a relief
right.
way, which then people feel guilty about feeling, you know? It's like but it starts way earlier, I think, than when somebody passes.
Thank you for saying that. I have had a lot of experience with grief. Lost at least seven family members, and some to addiction, some to cancer, that that type. And I think like anticipatory grief is really hard to deal with, because I do feel like, as you described, that you're waiting for death, right? And yet when it still comes, right, it still is shocking
Yeah.
and probably even more amplified as a result of all that waiting.
Right.
Yeah, particularly if you're not prepared.
So I went through a end of life doula program,
Mm,
and there wasn't anything that we didn't ourselves talk about to each other as a group.
okay.
We went through with different pairs or groups of people. Um, what do you want your death to look like? Um, let's
Wow.
say, let's say you found out this morning, right where you are, right who you are, that you have a terminal illness.
Mm,
What do you want? What are you going to do? And
right.
like you put yourself in that spot and in all different scenarios.
Yeah.
And it was something that I had never thought about. And I mean, there was a woman that I was paired with, and she was crying. She's like, if,
Mm,
I'm going to die before a year, I'm not going to meet my first granddaughter. She's not going to know who I am. And,
wow.
but that could happen. Like, that's the thing.
Right.
It could happen any day. Nobody knows. It's,
Yeah.
it's not just people that are sick, although that's who I would be dealing with for the most part. But um, it's bigger than that.
Mm. I think about like I just recently had a colonoscopy, right? And so I had to go under anesthesia for that. And they ask you at the time of that kind of procedure, what are your do you have rather a death plan, right? I think they call it a certain thing. I'm forgetting the phrasing. However, the answer I had to give was the honest answer, which is no.
Most people don't.
Right. And that's why I think that the power of a conversation like this is that it's never early enough to really come up with a plan on how you want to die.
Hmm.
Because I think it alleviates, and rightfully so, your loved ones from having to navigate that for you or
Hmm.
decide that for you.
Hmm.
Because it's hard enough to grieve, right? And then to have to decide those things. And yet, in my case, with family members all of the ones that died. None of them had a plan, including my parents who were aging, right? We as a family had a plan, yet they themselves had no idea. And I
Mhm.
think like um it's important conversations to have, right?
Important questions to ask. And
Yeah.
a lot of people think, oh, well, they don't want to talk about it, or,
Mm,
I don't want to upset them, or
right.
I don't want them to think negatively. But
Mm,
a lot of times it's a relief for that person to talk about it. And
right.
it it almost it almost makes them feel like one thing that's finished,
Okay.
and there's so many things that would go through somebody's head if they're transitioning, and
Right.
um there's just so many things that they feel like need to be done, and if they feel like their family members aren't going to have all those questions and they're going to know what to do and it's going to make it easier for them, they would
Right.
want to have that conversation.
I would hope so. I would
Not
hope so.
everybody, but
Yeah, I think if you're aware that you're in the process of dying, it certainly gives you something to do
mhm,
other than thinking about dying, right?
right.
And so I think it's very practical and very real. So let's talk about what is a death doula. I mean, I imagine some of my listeners at least don't know what that is. So if you could please explain the work of a death doula is.
So there's many different parts. And it doesn't have to be everything. But it would be a lot of times it's the caregiver is the one that would reach out to me, but the person that's dying could also be the one that makes the connection. And it is just kind of being an advocate for the most
Mm,
part.
okay,
It is asking those questions that the family finds uncomfortable, making them feel more comfortable about what's going to be happening, giving them an ear to get out any regrets that they have, any stories that they want to tell, anything like that. In addition to if the conversation goes there, I mean, again, it's like all it dependent on how long I would be with them and
right.
how open they are, but
Mm,
ultimately understanding what they want. What do you want the end to look like? Where do you want to be? Who do
mm,
you want in the room with you? Who don't you want in the room with you? Is there like an ex-husband that you don't want there? Do you want your children or grandchildren to see you like that, or do you not want them to see you like that? At what point do you not want them to see you? Are
mm,
there pictures that you would want to surround yourself with? Is there music that you love that you would want playing? Are there scents? I mean, the list can go on just to kind of
okay,
build a picture of what they want.
I
In
see.
addition to if they don't have, a funeral home picked out or funeral or anything like that, it
Hmm.
would be that as well. In addition to, do you want a big funeral? A lot of times I hear that somebody just wants a celebration of life later
Mm,
on. They only
mm,
want the immediate family, at, the cemetery. And they want something bigger where people can enjoy and people can, get together
right.
after. And so when that person passes, and the family doesn't know what to do, I can kind of guide them in the direction. Like
Okay.
this is what they told me, maybe we should do this, that kind of
Okay.
thing. So
Okay.
in addition to talking to the family members, letting them know process of death,
Okay.
how far along they might be, introducing them to hospice if that's something that they're open to.
Mm,
It's really and projects. A lot of times the person that's passing wants to do some kind of project. They want to go through their old photo albums and write down who all the people are, or they want to write letters to their grandchildren for
wow.
their next couple of birthdays, or they want to write down advice, or they want all of their friends and family members to write letters to them,
Okay.
stories. their most memorable stories with that person. And then maybe that person wants these read to them when they're transitioning, or maybe at
Mm.
the celebration of life. It's really endless.
So many things to think about. And I'm just really in awe that there's somebody who can embody that and help navigate people through that very vulnerable time. So I know I am, and many people are familiar with the word hospice. So how are death doulas different than hospice?
So hospice takes care of making sure that somebody's comfortable. They will send nurses and aides to your house if that's where you are. And they will make sure the person's comfortable, medicating if needed, making sure that they have all the equipment that's needed. They are there in any kind of situation where someone feels like they're not breathing. Instead of
Right.
calling 911, they call hospice. Hospice has a 24-hour line and they answer right away.
Okay.
There's a masseuse that comes. They also have a social worker, they have a chaplain. These are things that anybody can take advantage of. It should go through Medicare if you're at that age. Otherwise, insurance, if you have, should cover most of it. But it's a great resource where if you're at the 6 month mark and your doctor feels that you have about 6 months or less left that you can get on. And a lot of times caregivers wait until the very end when they're just so exhausted and they haven't showered in weeks and they haven't gotten any sleep and they're a wreck before they actually reach out to hospice. And then I hear all the time like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have reached out sooner." So I don't physically move people. I don't feed people. I don't give
Okay.
medication unless asked. These are all things that are possible to do, but not necessarily what an end of life doula would do. I'm more there for them and the family mentally and to teach, the process and to be an advocate.
Mm,
So,
okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is hospice is there to perform palliative care, caregiver roles. Not that you don't step in for that. However, you are really the advocate, the voice
right.
for the person who's dying, in the process of dying.
There's really nobody like that. There's not really a role like that in hospice. Now, some
Yeah.
hospices around the country have started hiring end of life doulas. Uh,
Okay.
but that's pretty rare right now. Hopefully that
Hmm.
will be something that is more common in the future.
Okay. Wow. All right. So, what kinds of conversations do people need the most help with?
I think everybody's different,
Mm, okay.
but I think just starting the conversation
Okay.
is the hard.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that, at least in my family's situation, every time death showed up, we were thrown. We couldn't talk about the elephant in the room even when we knew it was coming,
Mhm.
right? And so if we had someone who could have helped us just begin talking about it, I think it would have taken the pressure out of the balloon, so to speak, right? That's incredible. And so at what point should someone reach out to a death doula?
It can be at any point. Initial conversations can happen whenever. If somebody's getting older and they just want to start the process just by having a conversation, but not utilize the services yet, they can do that.
Okay.
But if you get a terminal diagnosis, or not even if you find out that you have cancer and you're going through treatments, no matter what stage it is, it's something that you can start uh,
Mm,
just to make yourself feel like you're getting all your ducks in the row, just in case, just like
okay.
your colonoscopy, um,
Yeah.
where they ask
Right.
that question. So
Yeah.
it's it, it's really whenever you feel like you kind of you start thinking about it more. Uh,
Okay. Okay. That's a
but
good point.
but a
So
lot of
is
times after a terminal diagnosis is when somebody.
okay. So what surprises people most about your work?
That it exists. Also, I can't tell you how many times I tell people that I'm an end of life doula, and they say, well, first they're like, wow, I didn't know that existed. And
Okay.
then they say, I really wish that I had someone like you to have helped me. And then
Yeah.
they start telling me their story
Okay.
of a loved one that passed away. Uh,
Yeah.
I went
Wow.
to a friend's party once. It was a
Mm.
birthday party, and I didn't know most of the people that were there. And so we were all kind of talking and mingling and meeting each other. And then every time it came up, I mean, I must have, it's such a personal thing.
Yeah.
People were just telling me about their
Wow.
loved one that passed away, my
Yeah.
sister, my mother.
Right.
I didn't get to be sitting with my brother when he passed away.
Wow.
And then, like in some stories, they're like, he told me not to come, that it wasn't time, but he passed away. And
Right.
so I'm like, maybe he didn't want you there. Like maybe
Mm.
he didn't want to burden you with that. And he just
Right.
wanted to die, alone.
Wow. Yeah. Having worked as a therapist, I'm very practiced at receiving stories from
Hmm.
people who have gone through a lot of what you've just described.
Hmm.
Um, I think what's interesting is that I just ran a retreat for women, and there was someone there, one of the attendees whose father was in the process of dying. And in fact, before the retreat ended, he had passed. And she she was grieving
Hmm.
and yet containing it, right? Or covering it up. And the last day before we said our goodbyes, the news showed up on her phone and she was devastated. And I thought, you know, witnessing, watching, and comforting her, I thought, wow, she really seemed not prepared,
Hmm.
to receive this news.
Hmm.
And much as you just described in that story where you said maybe the brother didn't want her there, I do think is a thing, you would be able to say more than me, where in order for people to really let go, they definitely need someone, someone or someone's not in the physical space. Like it
Hmm.
gives them permission to
Hmm.
let go. So have you had experiences like that?
Sure. I mean, it's for me, I do feel like it's sometimes easier to talk to a stranger.
Yeah,
Someone that's not going to judge you, someone that you can make mistakes with and you're not going to be embarrassed about.
right.
Um, there's something in that for sure.
But yet I meant more to the point of like heard, and you shared the story, but I mean, it's a thing, right? Where people who are in the process of dying, like energetically, sometimes they need the space
Right.
from
Oh, definitely. Definitely. My
loved ones that they're
grandmother
attached to.
I am so convinced my grandmother didn't want anybody
Mm.
to see her pass. She was
Okay.
actively dying for 4 days.
Okay.
My mother was there 24/7. I
Wow.
came, my sister came, we were all there. We were talking to her, we were sitting with her by her bed.
Yeah.
And then on Thursday night, we're like,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to go home, we're going to shower, we'll come
Right.
back first thing in the morning. And she passed that night.
Yeah. Yeah. My one of my sisters who passed from addiction, I was there at the end every day.
Hmm.
She was in ICU, and the day she passed, I showed up as I had been reading her something, hoping, against reality that she was going to come out of it. And anyway, there was a point in the visit that I had to step out and call her husband to tell him he should show up. And it was during that time that she passed. And I thought about it. I thought if anyone was too attached to her staying alive, it was me.
Hmm.
And me getting out of the way gave her permission to let go. And
It's
so I,
almost like they feel like it would be a burden for you to be there at that point.
yeah, exactly. Wow. It's incredible. The
I mean,
death
you hear
process.
stories of people that are actively dying and their loved ones trying to come in from another country and they don't get there for a week and they're going to die tomorrow, but they stay alive.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Also, there are facts around loved ones that are actively dying, waiting until after Christmas.
Yeah. Christmas is a big time in my life where a lot of my loved ones have passed. And I know it's
After?
not just personal, during the
Okay,
holiday
okay.
season.
A
It's
lot of times
very
they like to, that people try to stay alive
mm,
Christmas.
yeah, well, we never got that lucky. Anyway, um, so let's talk about why we struggle to talk about death. Um, one thing that struck me in our pre-screening conversation is how uncomfortable people are talking about death, even when death is clearly approaching.
Hmm.
Why do you think we avoid those conversations so much?
I think they're hard. People are scared. Nobody, whatever you believe, you don't know for sure where you go. It's just fear of the unknown.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's true. I think like as much as I'd like to say I'm at peace with the idea of death,
Hmm.
I think the uncertainty of anything
Hmm.
unsettles me.
Hmm.
So I can understand like that's would be tricky to be able to navigate. And so we talk about it as fear. We maybe it's denial or loss of control.
Hmm.
What do you think is behind all that?
I think all of that.
Okay.
It's a cultural thing. There are other countries that celebrate it,
Yeah.
that treat it differently. There are countries where kids are raised to talk about it.
Wow.
And here it's like if you have a child, you don't want them to go to the funeral. You don't want
Yeah.
them to
Yeah.
see the body. You don't, we shield kids from that. And so
Yeah.
they grow up thinking that it's not something to be talked about.
Yeah, I
And
think it's so odd. I studied in India for a while and I got to watch in one of their towns a lot of their ceremonial funerals and they were shrouded with children. The whole family was there participating in the process. And I was just really struck by how natural it felt. It was equal parts emotive. I mean, by just what I saw,
Mhm.
emotive and celebratory, right? And yet it was honored. It was a very spiritual, sacred process. And I thought, wow, if they're doing something right, you know? And so yeah, I'm really very much in admiring of cultures that bring death up a lot sooner than we do and in better ways, right?
In a lot of the training in both hospice and with my end of life doula,
Mm,
we talk about, children and how we all have stories about the first time that we started talking about death. And a lot of
yeah,
times we're much older. People were saying that my father was really sick and nobody talked about it and I didn't know what was going on. And a lot of times what they're thinking in their head is scarier than
right.
what actually is. And then when the
Mm,
person dies, why isn't the person here anymore? It should have been something that should have been discussed earlier.
yeah, I would agree
Just
with you.
open, just being open. It's nothing to shelter a child from. And what's in their head of where somebody goes is actually much worse than finding out the truth of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with you. So what do you think happens emotionally in families that avoid these kinds of conversations? I'm just thinking like does it fracture them? Does it not allow them to heal sooner?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is something that stays with them for many years.
Yeah.
That affects them in getting on with their life or being
Yeah.
able to talk to somebody about it.
I would also imagine there's probably nothing more intimate than birth and death, right? And I have three children, so I was certainly there for that. And I've been at the deaths of family members. And yet, other than emoting and then maybe honoring at funerals and such, we never really talked about the intimacy of death.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that? Like, what's available that we could be accessing if we just were open to it?
I think it's just knowing what people want and being able to honor them and feeling good about,
Yeah.
you know, what is happening and what happened. I
Because
think,
otherwise we're just guessing,
and
right?
and family members argue
Yeah.
because they don't know what the loved one wants, and people, siblings will think they want different things. So it does fracture those kinds of relationships many times.
Right.
Um, It's
Yeah.
there's no good that can come out of that.
So let's talk about that. Like, what are some of the consequences that can come from not planning?
So fractured relationships,
Right.
um, family members just feeling like they know what their loved one would have wanted, and then just nobody being in agreement.
And
And
I
I
think
think
if there's
that
ever a time you want peace or agreement, it's at death.
because
Yeah,
you can't start grieving when you're trying to figure out and
exactly.
scramble and
Exactly.
wonder what the person wanted or arguing with your
Mm.
family members. It's really it delays the grieving process, and I think that it hurts it because you might not end up grieving right away, and then it hits you in other ways,
Yeah.
or further down the line when a year later you realize that you haven't properly grieved.
This brings up a really good point about grief and relationships. You had shared something very vulnerable with me earlier, and you mentioned it, and then in our previous conversation about the tremendous loss impact, losing your grandfather, and then what you went through with your grandmother. But you were also impacted, the loss impacted your marriage and other relationships. I think so many people underestimate how grief affects partnerships. I can tell you from my own experience, I'm now divorced, yet when I was married, that's when a lot of these deaths in my family happened, five of them at least. And my ex-husband's mother passed, and I had dad who passed, and then siblings, and we could never come together like and support each other through that grief.
Such a shame.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was a red flag. However, it certainly was unfortunate because I would have loved to have done more and have received more. So, can you speak a bit about that? About what, so many people underestimate that. How does grief change people emotionally?
Oh, it can affect all parts of their lives. It
Okay.
can sometimes people just want to stay home. They
Mm,
don't want the social interaction,
okay.
or it's something that they want to talk about all the time, which is
Right.
totally natural. But
Yeah.
their friends that are listening are starting to get sick of it.
Yeah.
They sense that,
Yeah.
and it's an uncomfortable time for everyone. People don't know how to behave around somebody who just lost someone. Uh,
Yeah. I
and
would
so
100%.
relationships suffer, not just family members, but with friends. And all of a sudden you feel different,
Well,
and that nobody
because
understands.
yeah, grief is different for everyone, right? It's almost, I've heard that it's like as unique as your thumbprint, right? Like that we all have our own process.
Mhm.
I have a friend whose husband passed away a couple years back. And when when she was talking about it and I'm listening to her, she was describing it as a very unique thing to lose a partner.
Mhm.
And And of course, I had my own opinions about that. I'm grateful, like, I never went there, meaning I didn't make her wrong. I didn't make her thoughts wrong. And I thought, like, this is an interesting way to navigate this experience, right? Like, how do we learn? And this is what I'm asking you to support each other better through grief.
hmm There's certain things to know. There's certain questions not to ask. You don't, the person going to a better place.
Mm,
You must feel so relieved
right.
that you don't have to go through that anymore. I went through the same thing. I totally understand. you know,
Yeah.
just
Right.
things like that don't help. It's not about you, it's
Right.
about them. And no matter
Yeah.
how much it is exactly the same of a situation that you went through, you're not going through it. And you telling them how you got through it or how
Mm,
what helped you isn't necessarily going to help them.
yeah. I think
And
that's
they
a
might
really
want
good
to
point.
tell the death story over and over and over again. And I think a lot of times people aren't able to do that, which is why I think when I tell strangers that I'm an end of life doula, they share it with me. Right
Okay.
away, they bring it up. It's something they want to talk about. And
Interesting.
it's not something they feel like they can. And it's a process. I mean, it can take
Mm,
a really long time to grieve, and you really need patient people with you. And that patient person might not be your best friend. It
okay.
might be a neighbor that you didn't really have a relationship with before. Just because you're having more private conversations with somebody that you didn't expect,
Mm,
it's okay. You can still be friends with your friends, but that person that you're talking to can be anybody.
okay. So what I'm hearing from you is that it's important for the person who's going through grief to identify who are the safe people
hmm
that they can open up to,
hmm
because talking about it is a part of the healing
hmm
process. What else do grieving people need from people who care about them?
They just need someone that's going to be where they are. If that person, you know, says how they're not getting out of the house and they really need, I mean, it's about what they want. A lot of times they don't know what they want, but they kind of do. It's like,
Mm,
tell them you want to go for a walk every Thursday.
okay.
Set time aside on the calendar. And if they cancel, they cancel. But
Okay.
just ask them questions about their loved ones.
Okay.
Like, what did you
Invite them
used
to
to
talk about
do?
them.
Right. What did she used to do for your birthday every year? Like,
Wow.
tell me stories of, the first time you did this with her, or,
Mm,
you
mm,
know, that's a great way to honor the person that has
yeah.
passed, as well as bring up, you know, any memories, whether it be sad or happy. But
Wow.
even if the person cries, it's
Mm,
still they're not going to talk and open up if they don't want to.
yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I think, like, as you mentioned already, that it is important for us to be talking about this topic, whether we're anticipating grief, going through it, or are on the other end, I think, right? Supporting somebody in
Yeah,
it.
it's uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable just because it's not something we're used to.
Right.
Silence is okay. You know,
Yeah.
again, if they're crying,
Mm,
that's totally natural. It's not
right.
something to shy away from or say, let's do something else, or, you know,
Right.
get them some tissues. Tell them it's okay. Give them a hug if they're okay with being touched. Bring them
Right.
food. Just stop by,
Mm,
or call them. And even if they don't return your calls,
yeah.
keep calling,
Yeah. Yeah.
checking in on them, making sure they're okay. Don't say, oh, she hasn't called me for like 3 months. Like, obviously, she
Right.
doesn't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
Just keep at it.
I really appreciate you saying that. So one of my sisters passed away in December from cancer, and she has two grown sons. Um And one of them is about to get married, and the other one is navigating a younger path, however, grown. And I have decided to stay in touch, to stay connected, to check in on them, have dinner with them, spend time with them. And one of them lives in New York City, so it's easier for me to do that. And I think, that in a way, because what I can do is I can share stories about their mom that they don't know because they weren't there when we were young, right? And and I can hear from them stories about her that I didn't know because I wasn't there, right? So
Mhm.
it's a way for us to really extend her life by talking about her.
Mhm.
And it is something that is such a giving and receiving when you allow yourself to do that.
Mhm.
It's
And
important,
also, you said he's getting married. Those are the toughest times. I mean,
right?
a lot of times people don't even realize how they're going to react when Father's
Right,
Day comes around or
right.
when their birthday comes around, either their birthday or the loved one's birthday. A
Yeah.
lot of times Christmas isn't the same. Just the traditions that you had are forever changed. And it is forever. It's never going to go
Wow.
back to the way it was before. And
Yeah.
so these are times to keep in touch with them and let them know that you're there for them, that you understand this must be hard.
Thank you. Thank you. I think just as it's awkward for anybody to deal with death of a loved one during certain holidays,
Mhm.
I think about that. So let's talk about COVID because that's where you transitioned into this work.
Mhm.
You stepped more deeply into this process at that time. You mentioned how you were working still in HR in this other company and that you were dealing with, death of employee loved ones. And can you talk about what you witnessed during that time?
Pandemonium. It was no one knowing what was going on. Nobody was talking to each other. Employees had parents that were in the hospital, and a lot of them weren't talking about it. They weren't telling any of the other employees. They weren't, it was just such a insane time,
Wow.
because everybody was going through something,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
regardless of if somebody was dying or not.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what was going to happen. And so it was hard for employees to focus on things. And, at first the company just wanted to be like, just keep it going, like just like it was, but we're just going to work from home. But
Okay.
that's not what it is. And until it was recognized that, hey, this is going on, and these are all of the benefits that we can offer you. We have more therapists on hand. We have more compassionate days that you can take, an extended bereavement time. I educated employees on paid family leave, which they would get paid for in New York. All of these things that came up and tools that they could use that wouldn't have come up prior to COVID. I think that the company became more employee focused than
Okay.
it was. I think a lot of companies did.
Yeah, I imagine it did because I think it exposed something, right? What our cultural's view around death was. Like it brought it out to the surface because we had to deal with it.
Mhm.
So what do you think or how did it expose it? Like what were your experiences of what we were ill prepared for as a culture?
I think it was experiencing a regular death or a tragic death, but on steroids. I mean,
Okay.
it it wasn't unique to one person, but people weren't talking to each other. It was also very isolating. Very beginning, people were alone. If somebody's loved one was sick with COVID, they couldn't see their loved one. People had loved ones in nursing homes and couldn't see them. It was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of people that were scared of what was going to happen. or what
Mm.
could happen. And strange time.
Yeah. I mean, it
Hopefully,
def
I mean, I think that it hopefully did teach people some lessons, but I do also feel like somehow the world just snapped back to where it was before.
yeah. Yeah.
And that time was like a moment in time that
Mm, mm,
I thought maybe a couple years ago would have changed our culture and changed the way employees were thought of at larger companies. But I do think people are just kind of saying that that was a blip, back to where we were before.
wow. That's a sad statement of the way our minds work or can work.
Mhm. I think people just want to forget about it.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. So let's talk about hospice and end of life support. I know you volunteer with hospice, which I think, many people understand that concept. What do you wish people knew about hospice and how it works?
I think just that it exists and
Mm,
what it is. The person does not have to be at the end stages in order to go on to hospice. If somebody has a terminal illness and they have 6 months or less to live, you
okay.
can you can get on that. You're obviously at the point where you're no longer accepting treatment. Like if you're on hospice, a lot of people like to use the hospice doctors. They're very accessible for the most part, and you can call them anytime. I mean, God willing, there is a treatment all of a sudden out there that's going to make this person, live much longer. You
Hmm.
can get off of hospice just as easily as you got on hospice and
Yeah.
and do the treatment and then
Right.
get back on hospice if needed. It's not a death sentence by any means. It's
Right.
flex. And there are many people that have been on hospice longer than 6 months. There are many people that, have gotten off, gotten back on, gotten off, gotten back on. It's a lot of times when I tell somebody that, have you thought about hospice at this point? When they're telling me about their loved one, they're usually like, no, they're not at that stage yet. And it's
Okay.
like, what is that stage to you? Like,
Does-
there's no harm in making the call and finding out more about what can be offered because
mm,
hospice is there to help.
right.
People are afraid that they're going to give too much morphine and it's going to kill the person. Um,
Yeah. It's
you
a lot
know,
of misunderstanding.
a lot of misunderstanding. I
Yeah.
mean,
Mhm.
it's not until the person is at that point where they are
Yeah.
in physical pain that they would receive any morphine, and that you have a say in it. You can
Right.
use anything as their caregiver. Uh,
Yeah, I think like that's an important part of I've worked with hospice and different family member capacities, and I found like they were extremely important in terms of educating the
mhm,
caregiver and
mhm,
educating the family,
mhm,
answering questions, right? And I have yet to work with a death doula, so if it overlaps, I haven't had that experience yet. I can say for this about my experience with hospice is that they were so amazing in terms of how they were available,
mhm,
emotionally supportive, educationally, right? And yet, as do most people that you're describing, we were ones that waited too long
mhm.
to get
Yeah.
hospice involved. Why do you think that is that people
People are
hesitate?
same reason why people don't plan. I think it's
Mm,
just
mm,
people have such a negative, if you're on hospice, it means you're dying.
okay.
And people have
That's the proverbial elephant in the room, right?
people
Yeah.
have not like processed that the person is actually dying.
Yeah.
But hospice, yeah, they'll send caregivers. So you can get out of the house. You can do your grocery shopping. You
Mm,
can do your holiday shopping. Uh,
yeah.
it gives you some reprieve and you shouldn't have to wait longer than you have to get.
Yeah. Wow. Really good point. So share a little bit about what you've learned about being around people who are in the process of dying and the family members.
Many times when people are actively dying, they start disconnecting from the world. They start sleeping a lot. They they start maybe not making sense or hallucinating a bit if they're talking at all. There's a lot to know at this point. First of all, they don't need a ton of food. Hospice will totally work them through this, but a lot of times the act of chewing and swallowing and digesting at
Mm.
that stage is taking up calories and getting the heart to continue pumping and all
Mm.
of your organs to work, and it's focusing on breaking down the food instead of breathing and surviving. And so when somebody is in bed 24 hours a day, they don't really need that much.
And so family members over focusing on how little people are eating.
Right. They really want people to eat. They
Yeah,
really want
right.
them to drink the Ensures and to, if
Yeah.
the person wants to, that's fine, but they don't need the caloric intake. People can live for a lot longer than you think without food.
Wow.
Um, and
Wow.
having ice because their
Mm,
mouths are usually dry, Vaseline for the lips, which
mm,
gets very, gummy,
right.
different things like that. Also, like knowing that they can still hear. A lot of
Oh,
times I find that family members start bickering or, and it's like sometimes it's kind of cute and it's like there's, but they can still hear. So
yeah.
you
Mm,
can talk to them even if they can't respond.
wow. That's
Um,
a really good point.
Hearing is the last sense to leave.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's incredible.
So they might not be able to completely understand everything that's being said, but they can still hear your voice. They know
Or
somebody's
actively,
there.
they may not be able to actively communicate
Right.
yet. Yeah, they can hear it. Wow. So, what does dignity look like at in the dying process?
I think it's just honoring them. Um,
Mm,
I think it's, I mean, I think it's if you know what it is that they wanted, being able to do that in the way that they wanted, I think
okay.
they would feel, they would feel like this was all orchestrated almost. This is all taken care of.
Mm,
I mean, understand that it's not a clean process.
mm,
Just like a birth is not clean, you
hmm.
don't want, 30 people to see you give birth necessarily.
Right.
There are things that happen that people that don't give birth don't know about. And there's things in death that people that haven't seen it don't know about. So it
Wow.
is hard to be dignified. I mean, it's just something not to be shocked by.
Hmm.
The movements and twitching of the body are totally normal. They are losing control of
Mm,
of their body,
okay.
and and they're not completely themselves. And so it's hard to say how that can be dignified, but uh,
Yeah.
people not judging and expecting.
Mm, yeah, I think you're right. I think
It's messy.
too often, right, people expect it to be clean,
Hmm.
and it's not.
Right.
Just like life is messy,
Hmm.
right? And birth and all this. You mentioned in our preliminary conversation about death cafes, which I
Hmm.
think is fascinating. Can you explain what they are and why they matter?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different groups that do things like this. Death Cafe was started in the UK, I believe, years ago, and it kind of migrated here, which is great. And it's basically anyone. So it could be anybody that has one. You find a safe space, whether that be a park outside or in a library, in a restaurant that's willing to house some people, strangers. You put up flyers, you get the word out that you're having a death cafe, and try to get all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds coming in to talk about death. It's no judgment. It is not religious. They encourage people not to get very religious. It is not a place where someone that just lost somebody last week goes. It's more of a place where people that have already grieved or people that haven't lost anybody ever and they just want to talk about death because it's a scary
Wow.
thing and they want to hear
Yeah.
stories and they want to talk about, different whatever they want to talk about.
Yeah. That's a great, I mean, it's an interesting idea, and certainly is very, I would imagine, very freeing to allow you to talk about any part of the death experience.
It's a not-for-profit organization.
Okay.
And so there are no sponsors. Nobody is allowed to advertise what they do. I wouldn't be able to say, oh, your story, you have someone sick. I'm an end of life doula. I take my card,
Okay.
which might
Okay.
make somebody feel uncomfortable. Nobody is selling anything. It's just a safe space where people can feel open and talk about things that they don't feel comfortable talking about in front of their loved ones or,
Okay.
you know,
So why do you think a community like that is so important to grief and death work?
it's, we're all going to die.
Mm. So it normalizes it a
It
little bit.
definitely normalizes it. It gives it, so many people just don't have anyone to talk to,
Mm.
you know, gives people a space to do that without judgment.
Wow. Incredible. So, one thing we do on this podcast is we have our tagline, which says tools for practical hope. So, I like to leave the audience with some practical tools related to every topic we talk about. So, for somebody listening right now that's navigating either aging parents or a sick loved one, or simply realizes that they've avoided these conversations for too long, right? Um, where should they begin?
Try to start the conversation.
Okay.
And you can start it by saying to your parents, hey, I'm going to get my will together.
Mm.
I'm going to, this is what I want. If I am, in the hospital and incapacitated, here are my wishes. And
Mm.
maybe start there. See where it gets you. Ask them those questions as well.
That's really great because I think about, like, I have three adult children and we sort of talk about it, particularly because we've navigated death a few times um, together, yet we haven't talked about it specifically about me.
Hmm.
And I think that that brings up a good point. Like, I need to own that, right?
When you're all together,
Yeah, right, right.
it shouldn't be on one person.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. Like, this is something that can really, again, it's a point of intimacy, right? Where you
Hmm.
really get to be open and honest about
And
what's
as
important to you.
uncomfortable as you might feel it is, it could bring
Yeah.
you closer.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what kind of paperwork people should have in place.
So different states have different kinds of paperwork. So
Okay.
there's like a health proxy in New York. There's like living wills. There are many different most forms depending on where you are in the death process. You should on your state's website, they
Okay.
should have a lot of information about it, actually. New
So
York,
get informed about
get
what's
informed.
required about from your
Yep.
state.
Find
Okay.
a an attorney that specializes in the end of life. There are a lot of them.
Oh,
If you can, just get a free consultation.
okay.
A lot of them do that and find out what it is that they could do for you or that you think you need. There are so many options of different things that you can do and, you know, make it easier on your family. Uh,
Okay. Yeah, I really would love to be able to alleviate that
there's also like little
challenge.
laws that are tricky, like certain things where
Mm,
after someone dies, it's very difficult for somebody to inherit something
yeah.
specifically.
Right.
And so if your name is not on like your car or your house or something like that, there are issues around that. And
Right.
so things to think about, but there are many things that you're not thinking about. So, just seeking somebody out that knows more that can kind of help you think
And
of
that's what a death attorney
they
can help
they
you
can
navigate.
they
Hmm.
can yeah, they can help you navigate that, explain all the forms, make sure everything that you want is in order,
Okay.
so that it's all in a neat pile. And you can change
Right.
that whenever you want. Uh,
Right. Right.
so if you decide that the person that you want to be your health proxy is moving to another country or whatever the reason, you can change that. And you should change that.
Yeah.
And
You
make
know,
sure you have copies of those forms
okay.
because nobody
Copy.
else is going to.
Yeah. Good,
Um,
good idea. I mean, it's important, right? So how can um someone advocate for a loved one's wishes towards end of life if or even explore that? Like I'm thinking about like I had siblings who passed and I wasn't aware or nor did I look into what their end of life plans were.
mhm.
Can loved ones figure or ask or find out what someone's plans were? How do you find that out?
They should have that
Mm,
before the person dies. I mean, if
okay.
there is no will, probate can't happen. And so it's everybody looking for one. And
Okay.
it's possible that two family members have two different copies of wills, and then it has to go to court, and the judge has to figure out which one happened first. And
Right.
it's like a scramble. And so they would send out letters to every family member. Uh,
Okay.
and if people don't respond, then it would go to the next of kin.
That
Usually
sounds
everything would go
complicated.
to the spouse first, but
Right.
if there is no spouse or
Yeah. Or children or whatever. Right. Yeah. So what's one thing every person should think about before a crisis happens?
just getting their affairs in order.
Okay. Yeah.
Just having an honest conversation with somebody. It can be
Yeah.
start talking about it.
Yeah. We got to begin. We got to begin to have these conversations. Yeah.
It's the conversation is only going to get harder as time goes on.
Oof.
You don't want to talk about you don't want to talk to somebody actively dying about what their wishes are. I mean, if you have to, you can communicate, but
Right.
that's you want to honor them how they
Mm.
want everything to go.
When they can talk about it. That's why it's
Exactly.
important. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Wow. Well, I think today's conversation reminds us that talking about death is really talking about life. Yeah. It's about love,
Mhm.
presence, connection, honoring people while they're still here, and learning how to walk each other home as we move through this end of life process. I want to thank you, Amy, for being here and adding to that conversation that I feel is so important.
Thank you for having me. I
You're
think
welcome.
it's a conversation to have, so I'm happy to have it.
So, how can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
So on Eastern Long Island. I am on the North Fork. Um, I can have free consultations with anybody that has questions. I have a website. It's beyondsoundandsky.com. Um, I live near the Sound, which is a body of water, and it's also, as I mentioned before, the last sense that people have before they pass. So,
Wow.
um,
Amazing. We'll make sure all of that is included in the show notes. So thank you.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone you love. These are the conversations we all need to be having. And if you're navigating grief, caregiving, emotional overwhelm, or a major life transition and are looking for deeper support, You can learn more about what I offer in coaching, retreats, and so much more, the workshops at annamcbride.com. You've been listening to She Asked, Tools for Practical Hope. Until soon, be well.